Well, welcome everybody to the December 9th edition of Cafe. I'm your host tonight, David Lee, and I think we have a pretty full slate tonight. We've got Brian Barber at Fairfield telling us a little bit about some adventures he had in Japan that are astronomically based. I think Chris, you have kind of some extra notes about astronomical dusk. I've got a book picks session. I already have a couple, so I hope people in the audience have some book picks as well. And I've got some announcements, some regrets from Lori. She can't make it tonight, but I have some greetings and some events to tell you about. And council meeting tomorrow for those who are involved in council. And of course, our monthly meeting. And when Kirsten shows up, maybe I'll get Kirsten to tell us a little bit about the Wednesday meeting. All right. So, any additional items for tonight? I don't really see any hands. Okay.
Oh yeah,
Mark.
no,
Oh,
I also have something if there's time.
oh, all right, right. Okay, that's fine. And I see Chris is here. Maybe Chris has some space news to tell us as well. Hey, Chris, do you have any space news to tell us tonight?
Um, not really. I actually had some, but I was going to talk about that at the meeting on Wednesday.
Oh, so you have to come Wednesday to see it.
That's right.
All right.
That's right. But I understand we're talking about some books tonight.
We are.
So,
Is this the time for your shameless plugs?
well, I got a few. I got a few here.
Oh, okay.
So,
All right. I look forward to those.
well,
Okay.
I mean, just the only other thing I would be saying is, we have uh, our council meeting tomorrow night, and then our monthly meeting on Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm hoping Kirsten will show up. She can tell us a little bit about the speaker. If not, I will. Okay. So, new member Mark, you're in the audience at
Yeah,
Fairfield. Do you want to give yourself a quick intro?
yeah. My name is Mark Jacobson. I heard about the group through Kevin. This is my first meeting, and I'm a real amateur, but interested in different hobbies. I've recently retired, so looking for things to do, especially from a cerebral perspective. So I really appreciate it, and I look forward to learning about it.
It's a good community.
Yeah,
We like it.
good. Yeah.
Mark, have you joined the beginners group yet?
He just came.
Yeah. Oh,
Give him
yeah.
give him a minute.
Okay, I'll give you a week.
Okay.
You actually have a
I'm
month,
not sure what that means.
we'll fill you in.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I guess we could well let's do Chris Purse first. Kind of like the addition to last week about astronomical dusk. You want to share your screen, Chris?
Sure. Well, just a moment. I'll just kind of introduce what I wanted to talk about. And that was a really good talk that Randy did last week on the various forms of twilight, from astronomical to nautical to civil. And at one point in the presentation, there was a diagram with kind of a bar graph, I guess, for the different locations to show how much daylight there was, and one of them was at the Arctic Circle, and it pointed out that at winter solstice there's daylight at the Arctic Circle, and I was thinking about that because I lived in that sort of zone for a while, and I was thinking that maybe they'd overstated how much, the bar was too long. But actually, in looking at some numbers, I think I would say I was wrong about that. And I thought it would be interesting to show a photograph that was taken years ago with a film camera. And so I've had it digitized, and I'll share it now. And hopefully you can see that now.
Yes.
This is a view. It was actually taken on December 21st, 1987.
Okay.
So an interesting day, that's right around the solstice, in fact. In 1987, I looked it up. The solstice was actually early on December 22nd. So this photograph was about 13 hours before the actual solstice.
Okay.
So this is taken at the Inuvik airport, right around the
And Dubic, did
solstice.
you say?
What
city?
Inuvik.
Inuvik, okay, it is.
Inuvik, Northwest Territories.
Yeah.
And so Inuvik is about 200 kilometers north of the Arctic Circle. So, and thanks to timeanddate.com, I looked up some things, and you can go back and look at December 1987. And so the sun rose for the last time on December the 5th that year for 43 minutes. And the sun reappeared on January the 7th, 1988 for 42 minutes. So we're into the middle of the time period where the sun doesn't actually rise.
Wow.
And but as you can see, looking out the window, I mean, this was just a photograph. As I said, I took out the window because this was our Christine and my first year in the north, and we were, as is commonly called, going out for Christmas. And so we were kind of recording our first year in the north. And so I happened to realize that we had a good view of the runway and took this photograph as the plane arrived that would take us south. The Inuvik airport runways roughly east-west, and the apron and terminal building are to the north. So we are actually looking roughly due south, pretty close to it. And again, I said this was about 1:30 in the afternoon. And so I just wanted to look into, this is obviously daylight, you can see well enough. But I'm just looking at when, the numbers again, because it's been, a long time since I lived there, and I never actually looked into how long a period we actually had daylight. And first of all, I thought to talk about solar noon. So one of the things is you'd say, okay, 1:30, does this mean solar noon? This is an hour and a half after solar noon, and no, it isn't. Inuvik it uses mountain time because it's part of the Northwest Territories, and because the Northwest Territories, through the capital Yellowknife, links to Edmonton, the time zone for the whole territory now is mountain time. So every community in there uses that. But very interestingly, if you look at the longitude for Inuvik, you'll find it's actually 133 degrees west. So, it kind of looks on a map like it's maybe north of here or maybe a bit east of here, but it's actually quite a bit west of here, which you don't realize. And if you, using Google Maps, I said, okay, where is that longitude on the 49th parallel? Where does it come out? And of course, it's out in the Pacific Ocean. And then I said on the map, let's measure the distance. And if Inuvik could be on the 49th parallel, it would actually be 750 kilometers west of us, which is quite a long way when you think about it. So the time zone in Inuvik is an hour ahead of us. And actually, if you think of where it falls down here, it probably should be an hour behind us. So in fact, it's out by 2 hours. And sure enough, looking at timeanddate.com, the solar noon on that day was at 1:52. So this photograph was actually taken in the late solar morning, if you like, about within 15 minutes of noon, interestingly enough. So I thought you might appreciate seeing what it does look like north of the Arctic Circle, right around the solstice, the winter solstice. One of the things I was going to point out too is that Inuvik does toy roughly with the tree line. It's right near where it's kind of getting extinguished at the moment anyways. And so when you're out and about, especially, for example, driving on the road, which is plowed, of course, but it's snow on top of gravel, so tends to be white. You'll notice that almost everything is white when the conditions are like this. And although you can see the horizon where my pointer is going, it's not the easiest thing in the world to see. And you get quite a bit of eye strain because the light's really flat. There's no point source. So the shadows are quite diminished and you don't see too much.
So are there moments in time when you almost feel like you're out in space because you don't have any orientation?
Yeah, I don't know I ever noticed that. It's just, you know, that you just get you get an extended civil twilight because the angle of the sun coming up towards the horizon is quite shallow. So it does spend a fair amount of time there. And this one is estimated to be at about -1 degree below the horizon. So 1 degree below the horizon.
So it doesn't get any further down than that then?
Well, at the peak, it does come up to that as a peak.
Okay.
Right, because we're close enough to the Arctic Circle. As you get further away, that will get lower and lower, and the solar noon will be dimmer and dimmer. But you know, here where we're 200 kilometers away from the Arctic Circle, it isn't super dark at midday. And I looked it up on civil twilight started at 11:19 on December 21st, 1987, and lasted till 4:26. So it was in that above 6 degrees below the horizon for that period of time. And it was at about 1% from just before 1 until just before 3.
Could I ask people to mute? We seem to be getting a little bit of interference. That's great. Thank you.
Yeah. So I just thought you might be interested to see that. I just wanted to point out a couple of things, see if I can do this, about the plane, because the plane is kind of interesting as well. First of all, it's a Boeing 737-200 series. And although it doesn't show up super well, you might see that there's something here on the landing gear. So this plane is equipped with a gravel kit, so it can land on an unpaved runway, of which there are quite a few in the north. Inuvik is paved, so it's not an issue there. And the other part of this kit, apart from some strengthening and screening, and you can sort of just see it there, is there's a tube attached to the bottom of each engine, which, when turned on, sprays a vortex of air around the opening of the engine to stop the gravel and the dust entering the engine. Now, the unfortunate thing is that Boeing does not currently make an aircraft that comes equipped with a gravel kit. So, and these planes are getting very old. So the current airline up there got rid of their last one in passenger service last year. So there are some communities in the north that lost jet service after having it for, say, 3 or 4 decades. The other thing is this is a bit of airline history. Remember, this is 1987, and you'll notice that the name on the side of it says Canadian. So this is Canadian Airlines International. But the rest of the plane is, who knows what color scheme this was.
Yeah.
Anybody recognize that? Yeah, that was Pacific Western Airlines. So this plane had belonged and still did belong to Pacific Western Airlines, and they hadn't had time to take it in and put the new color scheme on it, so it was just had the name changed on it. And the other thing is this would have been a combi aircraft as well. So in addition to the 4 main doors and the 2 overwing exits, it had a big cargo door on the opposite side of the aircraft from where we see about there, so that this plane could be either all cargo, all passengers, or a mix of the two. And quite often when I flew around in the north, there would be a bulkhead installed by the overwing exits, and the front part of the plane would be carrying cargo, and then there would be seats in the back. And so so this was a workhorse of northern air travel in the day. And so there's a couple of things there. A plane that can't currently be replaced, or not easily. And there you have a picture of what it looks like at around solar noon, around the solstice in Inuvik.
So, Chris, Susan has a question.
Sure.
She says, if the sun doesn't rise above the horizon in daylight, is it kind of like dawn all the time?
Yes. Yeah. So it's a very, it's quite a diffuse light, and that's what I was saying. There's no point source of it. So, yeah, it's quite a flat light.
It'd be like
for want of a better
shadowless.
term. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't
pretty
see
much.
shadows. Yeah.
And I was going to say, if you notice, the aircraft has its landing light on, and you do see it quite noticeably, right?
Mm.
And I think the crew would have turned that on, whether they were required to or not, because they probably wanted to see if there was any ridges of snow and stuff on the graded, the plowed runway, because this is a paved runway, as I pointed out.
So Natasha has a question for you, Chris.
Sure.
What were you doing up there?
Okay, so my wife and I we wanted to find 2 jobs in the same place at the same time as teachers. So interestingly enough, we got hired by the Northwest Territories Department of Education to teach in a 2-room school. So as rookie teachers, we had a K-9 school with about 30 students. So it was an interesting challenge. I would say that, as brand new teachers, and then of course going to a very small community. Our community had about 140 residents. So
Interesting.
small place. So anyway, so I thought it was interesting follow-up to see what it actually looks like, as I said there, when all your light is at the civil twilight amount.
Mhm. Yeah, it's always good to remember that seasons aren't for everyone, or they don't look the same everywhere.
Yeah. And
Yes.
so again, on that, so there is about a month, and Inuvik's in that right now. It's a pity Lori's not here, because I think she had seen it and had liked it, and it showed up on my Facebook feed. But somebody did some photographs on November 27th using a drone and looking to the south, and had a couple of shots of what the sun looked like,
All right.
just hovering on the horizon.
I think, Randy, did you have a question?
Were you an amateur astronomer at the time?
Not really. I was interested in it, but I wasn't pursuing it. And that year actually helped a bit, because there was an astronomy unit in grade 7 science that I ended up teaching, and it was the circumpolar constellations. And having not taken any astronomy formally before, this is something I had to learn so I could teach it. And that was an introduction to Cassiopeia and Ursa Major and Minor, et cetera, and, which I didn't know that much about.
Well, thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
So Brian, are you
question.
ready to go, Brian?
Yes, I have to set him up.
Okay.
Can you pin us?
Maybe while Brian's setting up, I'll give you a few quick announcements. Oh, no, it looks like he's about ready. Okay, no, I'll wait then.
So use the arrow keys.
Yeah,
That's the way.
Okay, here we're coming up.
Okay, good.
Okay,
All right.
take it away, Brian.
Just put it on your lap. It's the easiest thing to use.
Oh, okay. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm going to give a presentation on travels to Japan. Just back a couple of weeks ago, my wife is still over there. We met and married in Japan. I was teaching English over there in a city much bigger than Inuvik. Page down.
No, do the arrows.
This one?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
No, to the right. Do the right arrow.
Oh, that one. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Okay. this is a map of our route in November. We took a loop around the Enkin Peninsula, Wakayama, and then we headed south to Kyushu Island, Fukuoka, Yoshi's hometown. So I'll just do some highlights, but focus on some astronomical stops along the way, and hopefully some things of interest to you. Okay, so this is a picture of Osaka and Kobe from Mount Roko above Kobe. Osaka's on the left, Kobe on the right. It just to show you the contrast between the mountains, of which 70% of Japan consists of, and their cities. And this is this is the megalopolis of the Osaka Kobe area, and as big as Tokyo probably combined. But what's really amazing is right after the war, this is what it looked like from the fire bombings during the war. It was basically decimated, and they built back these huge cities with ports. You can see artificial islands off the coast, and they're linked with an expressways, and that's what we use to get out of town and head south towards those mountains you see in the distance. But in the city itself, you can find these little oases of gardens and around the temples and shrines. This is just a few examples. I say a few because there are many of some of the Buddhist temples and Shinto shrines in the center of town in Tennoji. And so I would go out these morning. I like to go for walks in the morning and explore. And at the Ikutama Shrine, I came across this sundial.
Nice.
It was ringed with symbols of the Chinese zodiac, but it was a mix. It had West and Dragon and a few other things. But it also had a description of the equation of time, which I didn't know until I got back and did a research on it. You see the graph on the bottom corner, and what this equation of time, it accounts for changes in the sun's apparent movement due to the Earth's inclination and changes in the orbit. And I didn't know, but there's only 4 days a year. Dates are there that the sundial accurately points to the time. So there's this adjustment you can use called the equation of time. And so when I took this photo, it was 7:15, but the shadow was pointing to 8:07, which is 16 minutes, which is just what that graph shows. I've noted it, a little small mark in the bottom right corner for the 11th month at about minus 16 minutes. Yeah, interesting. On the second day, we went through a walk down this famous street. They have all sorts of shops, traditional supplies, including Christmas decorations and Christmas trees. But by chance, I came across this. On the outside, there was some globes, and then I saw a peek of some telescopes. So I poked in and made some inquiries from this gentleman, and they produced these little paper Galilean telescopes. And Randy's going to pick it up here. It's very light, and it comes in this kit. And I just assembled it a couple of days ago. Can you see it? Fine. Yeah. So we'll go out after and take a look at the moon.
I can't see it. Randy's standing in the window.
Yeah.
Here,
Yeah.
hold it. It's fun. It's light.
So I took
It's very light.
This is a picture I took with my mobile phone, so it's not really in focus, but the moon was in focus, and you could see, what was that? Those craters you showed us. You can see the craters within the craters. Anyway, along that same on the terminus there. So we'll take a look after.
Great.
Yeah, and so it's about 35 magnification, and the parts are all there, and I had to follow they had English instructions. It's designed for kids. And
So, Brian, is it literally made of paper?
yeah, it's a paper tube.
Like cardboard, right? Cardboard.
Yeah,
kind of
like a
thing.
cardboard tube.
Okay.
And then there's a tube inside the tube so it can hold the lens, the
Mhm.
ejector lens, just to kind of where the black and the white meet. And I put in an angle. I bought a separate angle, so you can view looking down. And then what I noticed is that when you put the angle in, you have to shorten the focal length because you got to account for that.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, that I was like, why was that? Why is that happening? And I figured it out.
It makes it longer, right?
But yeah, there's a little eyepiece you can
Yeah.
look at it straight on as well, and it's got a little finder. It's just a hollow tube for a finder scope, so you can center it. And it comes with a mount. Again, these things are just glued on to the tube. A
How
little
much
bit
did
of
it
tape and tube. It took me an hour.
I don't know what it costs.
Oh, cost. Well,
Sorry.
with the 90-degree, it was about $40.
Wow.
Nice tripod for $40.
Yeah, and
Alex?
and here's the box. It comes in this
Oh my
little
goodness.
tiny box. And so if you
Oh.
want to order it, there's the address.
Amazing.
And I did see some other ones, but yeah, that was
Probably
was
be
just
about
kind of fun.
$80 shipping.
yeah, it would cost you more to ship it. Okay,
Oh my goodness.
if you've been to Japan, you may have heard of been to a big electronic store called Big Camera. This is in the Namba district. It's kind of like the Times Square of Osaka,
Mm.
top left corner. And so we went there to get a pair of binoculars, and really informed salesperson, and he kind of walked us through the different options, and we bought a pair of birding Nikon. But you can see that circle. I thought, well, what could I use for some astronomy aids in Japan? And he's recommended this little monocle. It's a 2 times magnification with a 4 centimeter or 40 milliliter lens, and it's great. The idea is that you could use this to look for fainter objects in the sky, just to orient yourself. But I found it was more useful, like looking out the plane at the features on the landscape, or just even distance. So you can pass it around. I've got it focused so you can just see the door there, but you can use it for relatively, it's not great for close, but moderate to far distance. But just a little eye, and it's with my eye issues, it's been really good.
Oh.
And it
neat.
comes in a little carrying case.
That's so cute.
Yeah, and it's around the neck, so it's easy to pick up. And
So Brian, is it meant to basically amplify light? Is that the idea?
Yes, and it's very bright because it's a 440 mil lens. The brightness factor, if we zoomed in on that photo, it would probably tell us like it's around 300. Like a camera like a good pair of binoculars might be 120 brightness.
Yeah.
Poor ones are down like in the double digits, but this one's got a brightness of around 300. Can't remember the units. But yeah, and they also had a full spread of telescopes, primarily Vixen and some Meade, and there was a few Celestrons in there, but really well. And then descriptions and all sorts of things that you could. And this is in the city of Osaka, but you can get out into the countryside, and which we did, and you could see a few things there. But in the city itself, you could see Jupiter, and of course the moon, and maybe Saturn. But a good place to, of course, to say get out of town, get up into the hills. A lot of people go up here at night just to see the city lights, not the stars. But there is this little, they call it an observatory, but it wasn't really observatory. It was just a kind of an artistic display. They had another sundial, and then for Randy, I saw the picture of the moon.
Thank you.
And this is from the I Am Here project by Watanabe Atsushi, and it was called The Day We Saw the Same Moon. And it was a portrait. It was I think it was a collection of photos that he put together of the moon that people submitted during COVID. It was about just this time of isolation. People are at home, and he's also an advocate for people with disabilities and a few other things. So he just wanted to put something together to recognize that we're all still together, even though we're isolated during this difficult time. So that projection can go on. He's done it on walls and buildings. It's a big picture of the moon. But south, and then we headed south, did a big grand tour of some temples and shrines. And this is in the ancient town of Koyasan, like 50 plus Buddhist temples. We stayed in the one in the top left, and then visited a number. But the big attraction is the Okonoine Cemetery, the bottom right, and there's this pathway that leads through about 200,000, yes, I said that, tombstones of people that want to be buried near this famous priest called Kobadaishi, and his remains and his the temple for him is 2 kilometers down this pathway. So you walk through this, it's just amazing. And look at the size of these, like the Sugi cedar trees. They're 400 or 500 years old or more. Oh, they're massive. It's gorgeous. And then we went to more. We saw other big trees, a lot typically around temples and shrines. That one on the left is apparently 3,000 years old. It's at the top of Mount Tamaki, and the shrine up there is the oldest one in Japan, established in 37 BC. I think, how in the hell did they get up there, let alone live? Like hauls rice and supplies. It was quite an adventure just trying to drive up there, let alone think about walking up there. Nachi Falls has got a few temples and shrines. We just happened to come across it when they were doing a Shinto ceremony, prayers to the gods. That was quite attractive.
So the oldest temple in Japan only dates to 37.
37 for the shrines, yes.
Oh, the
Well, yeah,
shrine.
the shrines. Now, Buddhism was coming in slowly from China. Most of those temples and shrines date back to like the 500, 800
So you're
period.
talking about Buddhist temples or
Well,
Buddhist shrines
they're-
only.
The shrine in the top right corner is a Shinto shrine. Yeah, there probably would have been others before, but this is the most, like, this is the one site that has the longest history to it.
Okay. So
They do replace the buildings every 20 to 400 years, depending on the one on the top right. They were replacing. You can't. It's off the picture there. We're replacing it, but it's much bigger. And I talked to one of the construction workers, and asked him how long it was going to be, like a couple of years, and he said, "Oh no, 6 years to replace." And they do it traditional methods. They get, the big beams. It's all tongue and groove, no nails. It's put together traditional joinery method. Yeah. And the bottom right, Kumano Hongo Taisha, that's the shrine at the hub of the Kumano Kodo trails. You may have heard them. It's some hiking trails, 2, 3, 4 days. A lot of foreigners come there. That's why the backpackers in the picture, they've just completed 2 to 3 days, and they get their stamps, and then they can get a bus, find a hot onsen, get a hot tub, and get a nice meal.
Yeah, same name, restaurant on Cook Street, Taisho.
Sorry,
Taisho.
Taisho is a name for a shrine.
Yeah, there's a
There's a Taisho. There's a restaurant called Taisho. Okay. And then on the way back, because one of my wife's friends, we're having coffee in Osaka, and she said, "Oh, I just started taking an astronomy course." And she says, "You've got to stop at Zenbei Land just south of Osaka." So we did on the way back, and this is the entrance, and they were doing an exhibition, which I'll tell you about. And I walk in and sign up at the front counter there, and then the director, and I said, "Well, how much?" He says, "Oh, nothing. Come on in," and he gives us this grand tour, and points out this little live camera they had of Vancouver and all the horrible weather you're having in the bomb. And then he opens up you have this big 600 milliliter Newtonian Cassegrain reflector, and he opens it up, and we looked at Venus, and then I said, "Hey, see if you can see Saturn." He said, No, it's too light. But we zoomed in. Yep, sure enough, we saw Saturn in the daylight. And then, but on the right, I'm looking through a replica telescope that was made by Zenbei at the early 1800s. And he wasn't the first astronomer, but he was the first telescope maker in Japan. Now, there was an embargo on anything foreign except that came through Nagasaki with the Dutch. So we got a hold of some Dutch texts and some lenses and started making telescopes. and supplying the shoguns, so they could use that on the battlefield, of course, and see where the enemies are coming. And but then later, his telescopes were used by this gentleman named Ino, and he was the first person to survey the entire coastline of Japan. So of course, he used a number of instruments to do that, to know where you are. And you can, of course, it was all written in Japanese, but the curator said, well, just download this app called Pocket Curator app. So you can find it on the Play Store or an iPhone apps, and then you can select the museum, and then you can listen, you can read, see the pictures, and listen to it like a recording of all the different stations there. So you can go back and look at some of the history. There's more than I can repeat here, but it was quite an impressive little explanation of all the scopes and how they were made, some other astronomical instruments, and the charts and graphs that he did of his astronomical observations.
So
Yeah.
Brian, this was like 150 years after Galileo then.
Yeah, it was 1810,
Yeah.
1820.
1756 you show there.
Oh yeah, that's when he was born.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's his birth, and
So it's even longer than that then.
yeah, so it was around the 1800s or so that he
Okay.
started making these paper mache, paper tube telescopes. I think Galileo's tube was paper too, was it not?
I think it was wooden, I think,
Okay,
as I remember.
okay. So, but anyway, he made these maps, and they first of all they did all this detail, and then they transposed it to create maps, very realistic. Even by today's standards, they were only out a little bit in some places, but these maps were very detailed and they were large. If you laid out the entire archipelago of Japan, it would cover the gymnasium floor. That's how large scale these maps are, and we're looking. My wife, they're pointing at where we are. This is the bay, Osaka Bay, right there. And then on the right, you can see Mount Fuji. And then in 1995, Japan recognized his work with a stamp. And there was a movie made recently as well that plotted, described it was a drama of their efforts to map and deliver these maps to the shogun in charge at the time. Okay, we took a Shinkansen south and joined friends of ours, and we did a little adventure to a town called Hagi, which is known for its pottery, but also a guy named Yoshida Shoin, and he is recognized as one of the influential leaders for the Meiji Restoration. This is the transition from the Shogun period to their the industrialization around the 1880s. He tried to stow away on Captain Commodore Perry's black ships, but he was captured and he was sent back to his hometown of Hagi, and he taught a bunch of people, and he started, saying, hey, we should westernize, industrialize. So he paid with his life for his efforts, of course, but he did influence quite a few people, including and people that went on to leadership positions in government, including the first prime minister of Japan, and a few since then. So it's lots of history as well as nice pottery.
Why did he pay with his life?
Because at that time it hadn't been. He was working against the emperor and the shogun at the time, and it was treason. He was inciting insurrection, revolution.
Oh,
so this happened before the actual.
Not because he was making pottery.
No. He was quite young too. Like his influence, he was only like 26 years old when he had to get his head lopped off.
Oh, gosh.
But yeah, it's amazing. But he was educated from a very young age, and he actually led, a few excursions in battle too at a young age. Yeah, very interesting. Then we went. This is Fukuoka. It's the large center at the northeast of west of Kyushu, and this is where a lot of trade, art, culture came in through Japan because it's one of the closest to the Korean Peninsula and China. This is Yoshi's hometown. Her parents had passed, but that's her uncle and aunt. He's 92 years old. A lot of people live to ripe old age. They're still living in their homes. And then just a few pictures, including the shrine, like the temple, bottom left, where my wife used to play, go to kindergarten. And then on the far right is the shrine where we got married in 1991.
Wow.
And
That's you.
yeah. Well, there's a little, and it's Hakata is known for different arts and crafts, but that's a Hakata doll, the rugby player. It's a Hakata doll, and if you can't read the price, but it was only $2,000 for that.
Whoa.
So it's I passed on that, but I took the picture. So southeast of Fukuoka, there in the mountains is called Hoshinomura, which means Starfield Village. You think, well, that's kind of fortuitous, but Hoshinomura was founded by the Hoshino clan about the 1200s. And there's an observatory, not on the very top of a mountain, but on a knoll. And so we booked in, like Yosh had booked in a night, but unfortunately it was the one cloudy night between a whole bunch of clear skies, typical. But if you can just see Jupiter peeking through the clouds, kind of top center, and of course we saw the moon. So we were able to see a few things, but they have a little hotel, nice clean rooms, set private bath, and you get to wander around through the exhibitions and get a guided tour of the observatory, which I'll show you next, but about $70 per person. And there was only 5 of us that stayed overnight for the live demo. This is their largest. So that's 1,000. That's a meter, right? Meter telescope. It's got a few different ways you can deflect the light.
F2, that's
that's fast, eh?
yeah.
That's about as fast as you can get. So they have it all computerized, so this young lady could quickly just zoom in on the target, but of course it was all cloudy. And I noticed later, and she told me later, that there was no pictures. That's what those those little symbols are. But I don't know what was so proprietary about it. But we wandered through the museum they had there, and they had a couple features, one for the Hayabusa asteroid landing mission, and that one there was a previous one, but this one you probably heard, it returned with some samples from an asteroid. It was a near Earth asteroid, but it's carried on, like it sent the sample home, but it's carrying on in its mission. They're going to target another asteroid called 1998 KY. The other thing you probably heard about in the news was that lunar rover they sent up to the moon. I think it tipped over, like the bigger one tipped over, and the solar panels weren't working. But it tossed out one of these little baseball size transformers that popped open, and then it could kind of scurry around the surface. So that was called Sora Q.
And then you met an alien.
Yes, I was another alien, because in Japan they call foreigners aliens, so I thought that was kind of appropriate.
The alien met.
Yeah, we're both a couple of aliens there.
Big eyes.
Yeah. And then I also learned, didn't know, because that the planetariums had an anniversary, 100th anniversary in 2020, and they had one on site. It was the newer technology, not these things on a pivot. And they also had this massive poster kind of outlining all the history of the beginnings of the universe and life on Earth. I got a couple of copies of the smaller versions of that with me if you want to look. But the next morning we woke up and it was sunny. But it's a beautiful area. It's known for its rice terraces and really high-end tea. The tea on the bottom right goes for $50 for 5 grams. Quite expensive. And the tea is on the bushes are on the left, and the higher end grade tea is they only pick the young shoots, and they keep it protected from sun and fog, etc. But we discovered another beautiful little shrine tucked away up in the hills nearby. with another massive tree you can see on the top right. That was probably 800 years old. Just some other diversions, nearby. Arita, which is known for its fine porcelain. The top shops provide porcelain to the household of the emperor and best hotels in the country. And then they have this annual sale. This picture was taken early, but there was thousands of people in the streets trying to get, the deals on the seconds or the returns from the hotels. Bottom left is a friend of ours she's the only female sake brewer on Kyushu. And so we always like to go and sample her latest and have a visit. There's a traditional building in the middle. Yeah, a lot more I can tell you about construction, but and then on the bottom right, some of the traditional fabrics, and we got a tour of their facility, all done by hand with electrified looms, but they dye all the cotton. They use computer to do design, and then they weave these things. It takes about 3 months from start to finish to create a textile, and then they can create, in this case, these pants called monpei, where other people will buy the fabrics and make other traditional Japanese clothing and other articles from it. Here's just a selection of some of the foods that we sampled. Everywhere was going, and the prices were quite reasonable. That hot cuisine on the top right, that cost me the same as a pub food that I had just the other day. It's beautiful. Yeah, a lot presentation, something. If you go to a hotel, they will typically include a dinner and breakfast seated. So you get your house coat, your yukata after a hot bath, and yeah, it's very civilized.
Do they still have those amazing bento boxes on the trains?
Yeah, you can pick them up at the station, or they'll bring them through the trains. Yeah, you can pick them. Yeah.
It's one of the best things about Japan.
Yeah, what's really common now is like there's Lawson's and 7-Elevens and Family Mart, like the convenience stores, they're everywhere. And you can get sandwiches, bento boxes, onigiri, the rice balls, everywhere, like 24/7. So those are everywhere. And what's really, because of the demographics and I think there's something to do with the taxes. These convenience stores used to be the workers were students, part-time students, but anyway, complications. They're bringing a lot of foreign workers to work at 7-Elevens, like people from India. And then there's some white guys working down at one place that I went to. And I said, where are you from? And he said, he's from Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, they're bringing in people to work at some of these jobs. Yeah, a lot of tourists as well now in Japan, but most of them from Korea and China. So you do see white Westerners at like Kyoto, some of the big hubs, in Koyasan, which is kind of way out of the way, mostly Europeans. And then you'll see a smattering on the trails. But yeah, a lot of Korean and Chinese tourists there now, because it's quite reasonable price to get by. One last thing I'm interested, we follow sumo, and they were in Fukuoka, but it's become so popular and we couldn't buy tickets here. By the time we got there, they were sold out. So we drove by the Kokusai Center where the sumo is held over a 15-day period, and I saw a few of the younger guys heading back to their practice barracks and on the bus. The top ranked guys, of course, get the limousine service. But what was interesting, we could catch it on TV, of course, including driving down the highway. Yeah, the cars are equipped with televisions. You're not supposed to watch where you're driving, but it's on for those in the back seat.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you very much. I hope I didn't extend my welcome there.
Wow.
That's excellent, Brian.
Yeah, and I brought some traditional Japanese street, like the mochi red bean paste. They're in the corner for those who want. Looks like there will be leftovers, so I'll bring them Wednesday night for after. for our after party hosted by Alex. One last for you there, Randy.
Yeah. That's great.
Brian, I have a quick question for you. When you went to the bazaars, like where you found the telescope stores, would you find a whole bunch of stores together or just one? And then,
That was by itself, like in terms of telescopes and globes, but it's a street right down in the middle of Sakan, and they've got all sorts of traditional crafts in there. So yeah, that is an area known for its traditional craft, but the the telescope shop is a little different.
And it wasn't a proper storefront. It was their business. You know, they were doing orders and shipping and distributing to probably other science stores around Japan.
Interesting. I'm always been curious about amateur astronomy in Japan as well. I don't know if you got a chance to see any clubs or visit any clubs.
Well, that Zenbei land I mentioned, Yoshiko's friend has been going there for astronomy. Like they offer classes,
Okay.
and I don't know what she pays for that. But yes, they do have clubs, and then if I was looking at maps, I would take note that there's an observatory here or there. So I think it's quite common, and based on the number of Japanese people that are spotting new comets, for example, there must be quite a few out there.
Wonderful.
Great. Well, thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks. Any questions for Brian? Let's see. Oh, Sonic.
Brian, you probably can't answer this, but I have a Korean friend named Seikyo, and one of the early telescopes was called Seikyo. Does that mean something? Do you know?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
Sure.
Just wonder. Thank
All right. I'm just gonna have a quick look at what else I have here. We could
I was wondering,
go ahead. Somebody was asking a question.
good Brian, I'm just curious, do you speak Japanese?
Sorry?
Do you yourself speak Japanese?
I can get by, yes. Yeah. Yeah. So if you drop me off in the middle of Japan, I can find my way back to yeah. My goal, my wife would like to move back there part-time. Now she's retired, and if I go back, I'll go back to school because my Japanese has kind of been flatlined for the last 30 years.
Yeah. You must have had a wonderful time. As you mentioned, I noticed your comments about trees. Being a forester, you must have been amazed by the age of some of the trees.
Yeah, they rival some of our big West Coast ancient giants, and yeah, they have a lot of their native forests have been converted to sugi plantations, same species, those big ones you saw, enoki. But their native forests are quite diverse. It's a good country for bird watching, actually. Like in the forests and also on the shoreline. And they get quite a bit of migration through, summer, spring and fall as northern species go to the tropics and back.
Very nice.
David,
Yes.
can I just Cameron found the photograph I was referencing, so I'll just put it up.
Oh, yeah.
Moving into the next thing there, I found a bigger copy, but this is the hopefully you can see it there, and that's the height of the sun from a drone. Inuvik's a much bigger place than I live, by the way, so there approximately 3,000 people live there.
Oh, so that's as high as it reaches at the apex.
Yeah. And at 1:45, and this was, I think, on December the 2nd, so last week, I guess. Yeah, last Monday.
So you can have a sunrise and a sunset not very far
Not
separated.
very far apart, yeah. And you probably, unless you're somewhere where you can see to the south really well, you probably won't even see it. Right? You'll see the evidence that the sun is up, but And the airport where I took my photograph from is kind of just over here. This is this is part of the Mackenzie River. So these are channels in the delta because of Inuvik is in the up in the delta area.
So Chris, with so much brightness, you must have had blackout curtains to sleep.
In the yeah, for the summer, yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we used them in all the communities we lived in because even though the sun wasn't up all night, we lived far enough north that it didn't really get dark in the summer anywhere, any of the communities we lived.
Okay. Okay, so I think we'll jump to the book picks, and then we have a bunch of announcements near the end. So I'm just going to share. By the way, anybody who has any books, just let me know or speak up.
I do, David. It's Shawnick.
Okay, let me get through these, and then we'll let you share. So I kind of canvassed people. Some people sent me some books by email. So I'm hoping those people are here and they can maybe comment a little bit. I picked one myself, and I know Chris has a whole stack of books. So maybe Sonic will do you after the three I have here, and then Chris can show us his stack of books as well. Okay, so this one's from Natasha. I was quite curious about this one. It says that it has instructions on how to 3D print or do 3D imaging for constellations and stars. So I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit more about it, Natasha?
Yes, I'm getting I can't start screen sharing while the other participant is sharing.
Oh, do you want to share something or?
Yeah.
Okay, just get out of here. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So here we go. Share. Yeah, so this is one of Kimberly Arcon's books. It's called Stars in Your Hand. And it is quite interesting. At first, when I learned about it, I thought it meant you get a 3D printer and you make, 3D images of stars themselves, but there's a lot more to it. In her book, this is just an excerpt of one of the pages showing the pillars of creation, shown in 3D space in this image to help demonstrate how the pillars are separated and oriented from each other.
Oh, interesting.
From our faraway perspective here on Earth, it is challenging to be able to characterize the relationship between these structures. So that's really what the book is more about. A lot of astronomers that are working in this field. So I think there's a lot more to it. The title is slightly misleading of the book.
Mm. Well,
But
Natasha, I'm glad you brought it up because I've been sort of getting into kind of animation, and I've often seen these images of space where they do these flybys, or they
yeah.
they go in, and I noticed they use some of those techniques where they've split the image into layers, so it
Mhm.
actually looks like you're actually passing by some of these formations. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if that's how they did those.
Yeah, I think so. I'll find out more about it because I became more interested in the book because I haven't actually, I've only perused it. I have two or three of her other books, but I don't actually have this book. But it's available at Munro's and, of course, on Amazon.
Okay, I'll check those out. And let me switch back. So this one's from Reg. Reg can't be with us tonight. And I sort of remember, I think I have this in my library. I've had it for quite a while, so I don't remember too much about it. But Reg is quite fond of this book. And in fact, I actually think this is in the UVic, our library at UVic. I'm pretty sure this one's in there.
I don't know.
Anyways, he seemed to like the little descriptions and descriptions by the different scientists about different discoveries.
What is the secrets of the universe?
I don't know the specific ones. You'll have to read the book, I guess.
Oh,
So that's Reg's pick, and it's unfortunate Reg isn't here tonight, so he can't talk too much about it. So the next book is actually my pick. It's called Wonders of the Night Sky. You Must See Before You Die. Maybe a little melodramatic, but Bob King is an amazing observer, and I just listened to one of Bob's talks on AAVSO. So if you go to the AAVSO Facebook site, this Saturday's talk was with Bob King, and Bob is absolutely amazing. The way he describes finding these objects and what he tells you about them are absolutely amazing. So this particular book is kind of cool because he's got like 57 of these objects, and he kind of takes you through finding them and telling you little stories about it. So for anybody who's kind of new and isn't jaded in terms of what to see up in the night sky, an excellent book. So Bob King, and I think you can get this one at Boland's, I think, and of course you can get it on Amazon as well. And it's actually available on Kindle. So for those of you who no longer want paper books, you can get this on Kindle as well. But do check out the AAVSO Facebook site, and you'll find his talk from this last Saturday. Just an excellent observer. Okay, so Sonic, I'll let you take your pick.
Thank you. I have maybe less conventional astronomical reads, but the first one is a novel. It's my main one. The other two are just mentions. But here, I'll show you. Maybe you've all read it, but it's called Bewilderment. Looks like you can't read it, but by Richard Powers.
Yeah.
You know the book?
I don't. Can tell us about it.
So Richard Powers won the Pulitzer Prize for the book The Overstory that some of you may know, which was the life of a tree, I believe. I haven't actually read it yet. I have it though. So he writes kind of novels, but out of nature with a nature theme. He has
okay.
Something Playground. I'm reading it. I should know. I think it's called The Playground.
Yeah.
About the ocean. But this one is about an astrobiologist and his son. And so he's exploring planets in the universe that could sustain life. I just started it because it's part of the book club I belong to is doing it in January. So I thought a nice confluence of the two. So I'm too early into it to know, but I do know it's a main feature of the book. He's looking for an alternative place, as I understand it, for his son, who we might refer to as on the autistic spectrum. Anyway, so I would recommend it. And he's considered one of the best writers and fiction writers in particular.
Excellent. I'll have to check that one out. You know, I thought another fun thing to do would be movies that have astronomers in them.
Yeah.
That might be fun too.
Yes. So again, this is Bewilderment.
Bewilderment. Okay.
So who is bewildered and what are they bewildered about?
Well, I'm too new into it, but he's obviously playing on being wild, right? You see that bewilderment. He's playing on the word. I'm quite sure. Because I think he's showing how his son, autistic spectrum, this isn't the fiction, the story, doesn't fit into the civilized so well. So, but he's looking at wilderness in the universe, not just on the planet Earth, and what supports biological life. So he weaves in, he always does in his writing, as I understand it, good scientific information or interesting scientific information. The other two I'll just mention, just to thank whoever mentioned the elements of Marie Curie. I'm reading that. That's very
All right.
Yeah, not really.
Reg brought that up.
Yeah, David Sobel, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
very good. And the other thing I'll just mention, Natasha might know better. Somehow I get this news feed of astronomical news. Maybe you all do. And I think maybe they figured out I'm interested in it. But I just got an article. You probably all know about this, but I don't. About Betelgeuse, right? The closest red giant. And wow, was it ever interesting? And it was so well written about where it is and what it means and how, we could keep our eye on it, because it could have already, turned into a neutron star.
So Sonic, you have to get Wonders of the Night Sky now, because
Okay.
Bob has a whole section on Betelgeuse.
Oh, good. Because I was going to suggest whoever's doing the next session that, since I can't contribute very much, maybe I could do a little discussion point on Betelgeuse, especially because there's a new movie out. Not that I've ever seen Betelgeuse. And maybe it has nothing to do with Betelgeuse. I think it's really interesting. It's in Orion, right? As I understand it. So it's easy to find.
And it's red.
Fun, but it's fun because they're saying it could happen in any minute. It could happen, a long time away, but it could have already happened, right? And it only will last this brilliance, the initial point, for 12 seconds. So I think it's fun for new observers as a kind of mystery to focus on when you look at the sky. So if anyone would, whoever's doing it next time or sometime in the future, if you want me to present a little bit on that and organize a discussion, I would do that. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm going to answer a few questions here. Excuse me. Natasha is asking what AAVSO is. It's the American Association of Variable Star Observers. So they do all the stuff on, I don't know, recurrent nova, variable stars for various reasons, intrinsic and extrinsic reasons. That's a talk for another time. But it's an organization that actually studies variable stars. I hope I answered that. Yeah, Chris mentioned that as well. And Joe has a reference to variable stars. So it's excellent. Okay, Chris, do you want to share your picks?
He's gulping.
There's so many. He's just getting prepared.
That's right. So, I'm always interested in books, particularly about space exploration. I do get some about astronomy, although, and I was just looking at some I've gotten in the last little while. And the main astronomical book I bought is 40 years old. It was a biography of Sir Bernard Lovell, who you might recall for radio telescope stuff. And I actually once was lucky enough to see him speak. He did a big tour of the country. I don't know if Peter saw him, but he was out east. But anyway, so I'll talk about a few books about space exploration. So the first one, this is actually the book I'm reading right now. It's called A City on Mars. It's called Can We Settle Space? Should we settle space? And have we really thought this through?
No.
Can somebody in Fairfield spotlight Chris?
Somebody in Fairfield?
Yeah, no, somebody in the Fairfield area. I think Alex is going to do that so we can actually see the book.
Oh, I'm not sure what you're asking me to do.
No,
Well,
Alex.
you hang tight.
Okay.
Alex is going to do something for you.
Okay,
It's going to make you.
he's going to dig up the cover.
Yeah, he's got the power.
So, I think all of us have
Well, maybe
heard
not.
from some advocates
Wait,
like
wait,
Bob
did it
Burton
work?
and Elon
No.
Musk and
Why
Well,
not?
me. Hang on, maybe it's just me.
In the first screen, that's why.
sorry, am I not supposed to talk or
No, 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 you can. You go ahead.
and sort of about how great and how exciting it would be to go to Mars or set up
Oh, there we go.
okay. So I'll show the book again.
A city on Mars. Okay.
And I just picked this up. I live up near Tanner's, so I just got it here. But it's a fairly popular book, and it's a little different because we've heard from Bob Zubrin, we've heard from Elon Musk. Boy, it's going to be great. We're going to go to Mars, and it's going to be so easy once we get the big enough rocket. Well, it's not that easy, and there's a lot of problems to do with it. Now, we even have some books out where people, really question it, and I think it's actually good to look at these questions or some of the issues that are raised here. I think people have seen movies like The Martian, and of course there's some difficulties, and he has to grow potatoes with his own, fecal matter and all this stuff. But it's actually harder than that, and this issue or this book gets into some of the issues and difficulties that have to be dealt with and asks some good practical questions. So if we do make it to Mars, it will be because people are answering some of the questions that are in this book like this. These particular authors are, actually, well, they say that they like the idea of space exploration, but they just looked at it and said, have people really thought it out? So I'm in the middle of that one right now.
Mm. So they don't think we actually have the knowledge or the skill set to do this yet, to pull it off.
Not quite, but it's just a heck of a lot more difficult and more far less glamorous than it's believed, because you usually think of a thing on Mars, it's got a great big glass dome and we can sit out there and look at how great the stars are from Mars, or the moon for that matter. But they point out that the best place to be is actually underground because of the radiation environment and things like that. So it's maybe not as glamorous, but I'm still kind of in the middle of the book. So if that gives you some food for thought. So
Chris, before
Yeah.
you go on, we've been getting interesting comments from Cameron, and I'm wondering
Yeah, I
if
see that. Yeah.
Cameron, can you tell us what you've been posting?
Hi all. I just want to start a video up here. Yeah, I know the first one there is I have a few friends who are really into board games, and in fact, a couple of them run a YouTube channel. It's fairly successful out of town here, and Lisa and I are heading up to Tofino in January, and you're gonna be playing the Terraforming Mars game, and we've heard it's all the fun that you can have in 5 hours. So it's one of those sort of, we'll take a situation resource game, maybe a little bit like the Catan games or whatever, where it's all about a race for resources on Mars. And then the next two YouTube links I just put there is Joe Scott's a guy I followed on YouTube for a long time. He sort of does interesting, sort of like a Vsauce kind of a YouTube channel, and just one of the videos he did a few years ago was why going to Mars is a terrible idea. And then his counter argument was why going to Mars is an awesome idea. So he got a lot of flack about the first video, so he did a second video, but he's pretty well researched, and it's kind of that if if you aren't a book reader or something like that and you want to kill, 15, 20 minutes on YouTube before you go to bed, he's a good guy to sort of throw on, I found. So anyways, just thought you guys might find that interesting.
No, that's cool, Cameron. Cameron, is the board game mass produced or is it bespoke?
As far as I know, it's quite mass produced. It's quite popular. I think it's rated
Okay.
quite high. I haven't yet played it. A number of fans, our friends have, and they're huge fans of it. So, I don't think Lisa's a big board game player, so we'll see. We'll see how far we get into it. But I'm looking forward to it. I think I know anything. It is fun to sit around a table with a bunch of friends and argue.
Excellent. Back to you, Chris.
Okay, so I've got a couple of astronaut memoirs here. Now, one we've talked about before, I think maybe last time, Mark Garneau was in town, about 3 weeks ago, and selling his memoir, the first Canadian to go into space. And actually, it's only kind of the first half of the book that's about his astronaut career. And the second half is about his career as a politician. So, but I found I enjoyed the book. I think he's an interesting character. He's a bit more of a character than he's given credit for. I think everybody knows about what a neat guy Chris Hadfield was. And I remember when Mark Garneau went into space, there was an article that called him the right stiff. And but he actually explained why that happened. On his first mission into space, the radio wasn't working very, very well, and there were the early shuttle flights, and he was on an early one. They didn't have quite the communication facilities that they have now, so he explained that. But he writes about how he got into trouble with various things when he was a kid. So interesting thing to me was that he actually had a chance. He was actually offered a chance to fly on a Hubble mission, operate the arm to get Hubble, but he was already planning. He'd already been offered a mission to the space station, so he took that one instead. So I don't know if I would have made the same decision, but anyway. Another memoir is this one here, called Never Panic Early by a fellow named Fred Hayes. And, all the Apollo astronauts are, they're disappearing, sad to say. And so Fred Hayes is probably this is probably the last memoir we'll get from an Apollo era astronaut. Fred Hayes was on Apollo 13. So it's kind of the story of his life. And he did some of the early testing on the shuttle, almost got himself killed sort of between the two things. He crashed a plane and spent a fair bit of time in the burn unit dealing with that. But anyway, he's there's that. And another one, this isn't a memoir, and it's actually a year or so old, but I think it's available in paperback now with a different cover. But The New Guys, this is about the first group of shuttle astronauts that was chosen. Now, some of the very first flights, they had, some of the older guys had walked on the moon and all that, but the first group of shuttle astronauts included the first women and the first people who weren't white. And so this book tells their stories, kind of focuses on the women a lot. But that was a very big adjustment, from the Right Stuff days. There's actually a couple of books out on that topic now, but I think that's the best one, The New Guys. And one of the big books that's come out this year is this one about the Challenger disaster. in 1986. And of course, that was a gigantic story back then. But it's believe it or not, that's nearly 40 years ago now. So this fellow Adam Higginbotham took kind of a fresh look at it. So it's kind of a page turner about that. And there was the crew of 7 that was killed on that flight, including the first teacher who was supposed to go into space. And the reasons that happened are very, very complicated, but it just kind of boils down to people letting down their guard. I'm just going to mention one other book, which I actually haven't got yet. I'm supposed to be getting it. He just, and I know somebody will be very interested in this book. So hopefully in the new year I will have a copy which I will be able to show around. But it looks like a very interesting book, a very well produced book. Matthew Schindel, the author, is he's an acquaintance of mine. He's a space historian at the Smithsonian in Washington, and so I'm looking forward to this. So I maybe when I get it, I can make a presentation about it in the new year. So
I'd like that.
Beg pardon?
I would like that.
Yes, I'm sure you would. So so that's why I brought it up right now, because but you know, thanks to our friends at Canada Post and all this, I don't have it yet. So I will leave it there.
That's great.
Our
Thanks,
next
Chris.
speaker.
Does anybody else have any more books? I don't see anybody. Oh, Gary does.
All righty. So I always am interested in getting kids of 6 and 7 years old interested in astronomy. So I think I might have even shown this before, but this is my all-time favorite astronomy book. You guys recognize this?
Yes, Curious George.
No, this is H.A. Ray, The Stars.
I think he did George too.
Did he? Okay, maybe
Yeah.
so. Okay, well, I don't know about that. But this one here, I've grown up with. It was first brought out in 1952, and since I'm 71 years old, it's 1 year older than me. The reason I like this, and this is for all of your entertainment, is because it approaches stargazing from a kid's point of view. For example, it even makes the Leo the lion look like a lion, and Regulus look like, and the bear, the Big Dipper look like a bear, and Regulus look like, Leo the lion look like a lion. So kids can actually find these things when they're looking for them, which is amazing, you know, like seriously. And also it has cool stuff in it, like this is what would happen if you slice our Milky Way in half. And you make it look like a big pie with a nice slicing through it. But, you know, it's got all sorts of cool stuff like this to explain to kids why we have seasons and you know, the Earth being tilted and all that kind of good stuff. So highly recommended for anybody with 6 and 7 year olds, you know, that age, wanting to get into astronomy, even adults for that matter, because it explains it so easily. So I'm a big fan of this book.
Excellent. That's a wonderful choice. And actually, for those of you who have Stellarium, for instance, you can pick H.A. Ray constellations.
Yep, I do.
You could do that as well. Great. Thanks, Gary. Anybody else?
David?
Yes.
We'd like to show something which is not a book, but it's how I get my reading material.
Okay.
And I thought it's a resource that people would be interested in. If I can find where my Zoom went. It's here somewhere. There we go. And share. There we go. It's this thing. It's from Harvard, and it's called the Astrophysics Data System. And if you know, like, let's say I just type in M31 in here, but you could do anything in astronomy. And it gets you all the scholarly papers. And in astronomy, they're actually pretty good at making things available. So, you know, I'm just picking this one totally at random. And you can see the abstract here. And then if it has this button, then you can get the PDF of it. You got to save it before you can open it. Come on.
Randy, are all the publications freely available or just some of them?
No, a lot are behind a wall. But the astronomy community is really very good at making things open. And so this really is, you know, when I do these deep dives, I often get them from this this Harvard abstract place. So what does it say? It's UI ads abs harvard.edu.
Actually, why don't you scrape that, Randy, and paste it into the chat so we can pick it up?
That's a very good idea. And it's just fantastic for bringing the whole world of astronomy, and it's got lots of, you know, nice search, you know, the smart searches as well as typing in one thing. And I've just, as I said, I found it very useful very often.
That sounds like a good recurring spot on Cafe. Just one on resources. I got a few of my own that I really like. I won't do them tonight, but wow, sounds good. Okay, so if there are no more books for tonight. Oh, did Sonic have something to say?
Well, you triggered my memory about something and talking about a movie. So I know a lot of people here aren't interested in fiction and movies, but I am. And maybe you have people in your life and it allows you to bridge your interests, right? Like Bewilderment is the book. But there is a new movie that is not factual, probably, but Fly Me to the Moon. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I've started watching it. I haven't finished.
Yeah. Apple. So it does really bring you into that moment, though. That's what fiction or movies can do.
Yeah.
And I found it so moving. It took me by surprise. It was really just for entertainment that I started crying when they made it. When they made, you know, when they walked on the moon, right? And they were safe. So it really does give your imagination that capacity to return to that moment and appreciate it, right?
Oh, excellent. I'll have to finish watching it now.
Fly Me to the Moon is about how marketing saved NASA.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's an interesting twist.
It is a really interesting twist. Yeah.
Yeah, Chris, you have your hand up? I can't hear you, Chris.
Chris, you're muted.
I have one more book I want to mention, and this is something I found on the remainder bin at Monroe's. So if you're interested in this one, it'll cost you what, $8 or $10 or something, and it's called Dr. Space Junk versus the Universe. And this is about space archaeology. you know, and there are people who are doing this and thinking about it, you know, like artifacts that are left on the moon and or shot off into space and what their eventual fate is. I haven't really looked at this book yet, but it's just an intriguing thing, and it's cheap and it's easily available if that tickles your fancy at all.
Mhm.
Excellent.
We got Brian here.
Oh, Brian's got his hand up.
Yeah, something maybe to link all those previous books topics. But a book that comes to mind with reference to Mars and junk in space and Elon Musk's dreams. I read, I think it was a book from the library. It was Carl Sagan's Pale Blue Dot.
Oh yes, classic.
Yeah, and I in that book, there's Carl projecting, if our species is going to survive, we have to get off Mother Earth, because we're either going to kill ourselves or an asteroid will. But there's a phrase in there that says, like, we have to leave the cradle of Mother Earth. And then a few months later, I saw an interview with Elon Musk, and he repeated that phrase as if it was his dream. And this was why he was, on the pursuit to go to the moon and go to Mars. So I'd heard that he read a lot of books in his dad's library. I suspect that Pale Blue Dot was on the bookshelf. And look what that launched.
Wow.
I think Elon Musk's dream is to accumulate enough $1 bills that he can build a stepladder to Mars.
It takes money to get up there. That's right. Yeah.
No, just stacking them up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great,
Well,
thank you.
of course, I'll just raise the ethical issue. My brother 40 years ago said, don't worry about the Earth. We're just going to go into space and live there. So everyone's heard it 1,000 times, right? But it is often, and I'm sure it's with Elon Musk, given the regime he's supporting, even though he developed Tesla, a little bit of a problem. Like, I'm really always curious, what is the motivation of this, right? Around caring for the Earth as well. Anyway, I know this is maybe tired argument, but I think it's really important in the Mars conversation.
It sounds like you should read that first book I talked about, the A City on Mars, because they get into that whole discussion, but kind of from a different angle than what you usually see.
Oh, nice. Okay, thanks for that.
I just noticed Miles popped a book into the chat. Can you tell us a little bit about it, Miles?
Yeah, it's based on a possible theory that instead of dark matter, there's trillions of atom-sized and smaller or bigger black holes filling up the mass that's missing. So this person got so excited about this theory, she wrote a little kid's book about this little black hole that makes its way around the universe. It could be everywhere, and I just heard her interviewed, and it sounded great. I haven't read it, but it looks like it could be a good thing. She was wonderful to hear interviewed, and I like.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. There's lots of opportunities in future cafes to talk more about books and movies and any other kind of medium you want to talk about. So I hope we will revisit that in future sessions. But I think I'm going to start to wrap up. I've got a few announcements from people. I promised Lori I would give her her voice while she's gone. So just a second here. Okay, so just a reminder for people with calendars and publications. I think she says that there's still. Oh, are people seeing this? Oh, not yet. How's that? People seeing it now?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So she mentioned to me that there are still people that haven't picked up their calendars or haven't paid for their calendars and publications. And there are still some Victoria Center calendars from Joe, apparently. So you can get those up at the center. Now, she reminded me that they're going to try to keep the center open on Saturdays until Christmas. So, in fact, that's what she says here. The center's open for the next 2 Saturdays from 10 to 2 for Christmas shopping. So remember that. And there's a couple of interesting events coming up. This Saturday, there's going to be a paint-in. So I think there's an artist that's going to help you paint some aurora. So based on a photograph that I think Amy may have taken, I think. And there's a winter solstice party. So Lori, myself, and Patricia are going to be talking about solstice stories and what solstice is all about. And of course, pancakes and waffle breakfast. So it'd be great to have people come up for that. And I think they're still looking for some people to sit at the welcome desk for that event. And of course, annual appeal for donations. So they can always use some money for sure. So that's some notes from Lori. I just wanted to mention this Wednesday, December 11th, I believe. Let me just find this here. I noticed that Kirsten's not here, so I'll put this plug in for her. So we have Amy Archer. She's gonna redo her talk called North Star to Freedom. I've seen this a number of times. It's a great story. So it's about the Underground Railroad and how people escaped slavery through the railroad. Oh, Natasha, I just noticed.
You muted.
Is she on? Hold your space. Oh, there you go.
The message from Lori. Can you bring that up again? There was a point there I just wanted to refer to.
Okay. Let me just see if I can find it.
Or I can just tell it. Just toward the end of her note, she makes reference that there's an anonymous donor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I don't know much about that. You're going to have to ask Lori about that maybe on Wednesday.
Wanted to reinforce that message because that's a great
Yeah.
incentive for people to make a donation, that then any gift they make will be doubled.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I'm sure Lori can speak to that on Wednesday. Okay. So for Wednesday, we've got Amy Archer. And as I mentioned, she's going to redo her talk on North Star to Freedom that she did at the museum. Great talk. I think it's a wonderful talk for Christmas. So I think that's it. Randy, did you want to do one more thing?
Well,
David, can we just, before we move on, could I share the screen for a moment?
Yep.
I just want to point out that Wednesday's talk is not in our normal room.
Oh, right. That's what I wanted to talk about.
So normally we would be in this room here. This week we're in this room here.
Right.
So if you know, and ignore this, the modular dining facility is gone. So when you're walking to the building, most people would park over here, walk across here into this door and into here. If you do that, keep walking, walk out the door and go out and around the big part of the Elliott building and into the lecture hall part.
Oh.
Yeah,
And
I'm
we're in
gonna
the second room on, this is the Faculty of Science office.
Yeah.
And this is a classroom, and these are classrooms.
Yeah, Chris, I wonder if maybe we can put a sign out somewhere to guide people.
Yes, we
I guess we'll see.
that.
We'll figure that out. Yeah.
We do not go into this room because there's an exam in progress.
You won't be popular if you do that.
No.
Yeah,
So-
is the room our old room from 3,000 years ago in the basement?
No, it's on the main floor. I asked for a main
Okay.
floor room.
Yeah.
For access, but it's above the old room, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's a room that doesn't have a sloping floor. It's not like the
Yeah.
real steep one
No,
that's in
it's
the main area.
so here's the parking lot. Here is it without there. You go across the road. You can go around the Bob Wright Center up towards the McPherson Library. And it's in the lecture hall of the Elliott Building. And our room that we meet in is up above this corner on the fourth floor, you know, when we go up for coffee.
Right.
So you're going basically to the building where we have coffee, but don't go into the main part of the building, go into the lecture wing where this is here. And yes, we'll have to have signs up.
Oh, and maybe a couple of other things. As I mentioned earlier on, we have a council meeting on Zoom tomorrow at 7:30. Anybody who wants, whether you're on council or not, you're invited if you're interested in the business of the center. I did send out information on it on the Sky News list today. One other thing, maybe we should just have a quick review of what the story is about Astronomy Cafe, sort of as we approach Christmas and when it's happening and not happening.
Good. So next week is the last of the year. Chris Pearce is host. And Chris, can you also send out the invite? Because I'll be traveling to Italy. Poor me.
Ah, how fancy. Yes. And who's doing the tech? Is that Alex?
And then Alex and Kevin.
Okay.
And then
Will Kevin have your key?
he has my key.
Perfect. Thank you.
And then we restart on January 6th, is it? And Lori will be the host.
Yeah, the first Monday in January, because it's far enough after New Year's Day.
I'm pretty sure it's the 6th.
Yes, it is.
So this is the penultimate. Chris is doing the last of the year, and then we will start in the new year again.
Randy, before you do your last thing,
There's also Cameron, yeah.
yeah, Cameron wanted to say something.
Oh, hi. Again, everyone, thanks. I asked Randy this question earlier today. As some of you may or may not know, there's been a lot of tree clearing going on Prospect Lake Road over the last few months. They've taken down about 300 trees. We had an issue or a concern a couple of years ago when we first brought our little observatory out. I'll try to share my screen here and just let me know if this screen 2 works. Is the screen sharing working?
Not yet.
See you.
Not.
There's a second button, Cameron, once you...
Yeah, so I got screen 2 and then...
There's a green button at the bottom of the screen.
Oh, share. There we go.
Yeah.
There it is.
There it is. Perfect. Okay, so if we do this one here. You guys see the map?
No, yep, now I do.
Okay, yeah. So just to sort of explain, so Prospect Lake Road's running sort of initially, I guess, depending on how you look at it, east to west and then north to south along the left-hand side of the map there, where it says streetlights. Can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, down it says streetlights. Our house is right basically where the word avenue is there, and our little mini observatory is about where the E is. And we sent in a request to Sanchez a couple years ago because they had cleared a couple trees, and then we have a street light located here, and our little observing area is as you notice down there, and we were dealing with this pouring into our dome. Yeah, Sanchez responded really, really quickly. They came out, if it wasn't the next day, it was the day after, and they put shrouds up on those two streetlights. Since then, though, 3 of our trees were part of the 300 that came down. We lost 2 cedars right below the words Lake Avenue. Those 2 cedars are gone, as well as a big grand fir that was located. It's located right here. So just sort of standing in the observatory the other day, looking up, I'm just staring at these streetlights. But it also occurred to me with the Saanich bylaw for light levels and light pollution, I think it's bylaw 8200, Schedule B. And Randy, you mentioned David Robinson is sort of the person who's talked to Saanich or people in the past about commercial lighting.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
so I reached out to BC Hydro because I've been in touch with them about the trees, obviously, and just they took out our fence when they were bringing one of them down. But he said, yeah, BC Hydro, we definitely maintain the lights, but Saanich is involved in the design, the layout, the lumens, the wattage, the directions, and all that kind of thing. So I just wasn't sure if we had a form letter or anything boilerplate sort of on hand that we would send in, from RASC Victoria, because it's already probably pretty noticeable from the hill. I haven't been up there in a while, but looking down, and then I can only assume with the extra power they're adding, they're going from single phase to 3-phase, all the way from this is Meadowbrook here, all right along the water, and then all the way to Munn Road. And they'll have a lot more juice to pull from if they wish to, even if they use LEDs. But I think we have 95-watt bulbs in our area right now, where some of the other roads have 60s. But again, shrouds or even, I'm just worried it's one of those things that, yes, it's a bylaw, but it could just slip through and they may not even pick up on it. I'm not sure.
Well, keep an eye on it, Cameron, and definitely contact David.
Okay. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Randy.
Okie dokie. I'm going to do a quick version. I can do that. I don't always talk for half an hour. Let's see. F5. It's supposed to work. F5. Oh, I know what else happened. I got to get out, and now. There we go. So on Friday, a new spaceship went up. It's the program is called Project for Onboard Autonomy, and it's actually these micro satellites that the European Space Agency makes, and they're more for figuring out technology. They're not their big budget things, but this one is to work out a formation configuration, trying to get 2 satellites to work together. And one of the best ways to demonstrate that is to actually make an eclipse. And so, as you know, the way we have seen the eclipse on Earth is when, fortuitously, the moon, which is the same angular size as the sun, when it ends up in front of the sun, then it obscures the really bright part of the sun, the photosphere, and we see the corona. And when John took these photos, I don't know whether these pictures are 1,000th or 1/10,000th the amount of light, but you will never see the very faint corona when the photosphere is visible, because it's just so many thousand times brighter. And so you have to use what's called a coronagraph, where you stick something in front of the sun. And the one that we get to see every day when we want to look at solar storms is the large angle spectrometric coronagraph. But it obscures like from 3 solar radiuses on 3.7. That's C3. That's the one we usually look at. C2 is still working. C1 didn't work for very long. And you can see that it can see the corona right down to 10% beyond the disk of the sun. Well, what this thing is going to do is it went up as one spaceship, but then it's broken apart. And now until March, they're going to set it up, and then first light will happen in March. But it is set up so that these two guys are going to talk to each other. This is not done from Earth. The two spaceships have to orient themselves just perfectly. They're 150 meters apart, and they have to have millimeter precision. And the other thing, they didn't get to go up with a very fancy platform that could put it like to the clever thing would be to put this to the one of the Lagrange points. But what they're doing is it's doing a highly eccentric orbit. So that's about 600 kilometers. And the apogee is about 60,000 kilometers away. And then what happens is each orbit, which takes about 20 hours, they just fly free. Nothing is done to them until about 6 hours after the perigee, and then they get themselves in line. They have little thrusters or whatever. And then for 6 hours, imagine a solar eclipse for 6 hours, and every day they get another solar eclipse. And so there's going to be 6 hours that they stay in formation, and then they get out of formation and it flies around. And they have enough fuel to last for a couple of years. And simple technology here around the objective lens of the telescope, it's two sets of 4 light sensors. So there's 8 light sensors. And if any light gets towards one of these LEDs, then it makes a correction. So it's super simple. I mean, it's very difficult, but this idea by itself is simple. And it reminded me of a YouTube that I saw where this guy, without a computer, this is just a little amplifier, and you have 2 light sensors on either side of your solar panel, and they control a motor. And if this light sensor sees more light than this one, then there'll be a bit more voltage that direction, and the motor will turn so that the other one gets more in line. So that's the sort of thing that this very fancy machine is doing, but somebody did it at home. And this guy, the Smarter Everyday guy, I forget his name, he showed how that Parker probe is basically doing the same thing. One of the ways that they make sure that all the instruments behind the solar shield of this spaceship, which is going really close to the sun, and if anything gets hit by direct sunlight, it's going to fry. They got like 6 minutes that it would survive, and then it's dead. And so what they do is they have 4 light sensors behind the light shield, and if any of them see any light, then it does a correction. So that is the Roba 3, which was just sent off, and it's going to be pretty cool.
So the purpose is to look at things around the sun on the corona, and
Well, the purpose of the mission is to show that they could do formation flying, because then you could imagine sending up a fleet of things and putting a huge telescope in the sky or something. But this is just to say, is it possible to keep satellites with millimeter precision hundreds of meters apart? And you'll know it works or not, because you're not going to get a corona if you don't have the obscurer exactly in the right spot.
Right.
It's amazing.
Great, thanks, Randy. Well, I think we've just come to the end of this Astro Cafe.
Whoa!
Looks like
Well, thank you. We'll see everybody next week with Chris Purse.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Good night. Thank you.